Alright, welcome back all to week 11. This is video 2 of the videos for this week. And so in this, we will be going over null objects, blending modes that are specific to AfterEffects, and then also track mats. So what I want you all to do when you all start this video is select your layers panel and then make anything that we were doing in our previous video invisible. And so from this, what I then want you to do is create a new shape object. It can be, it can just be a star or anything really. And you're going to take that and just center it. And then on top of that, I'm then now going to also create some text. I'm going to type out my name, but you all can type out anything that you see fit. So when I have these objects kind of together, one thing that I'm thinking about is like, what if I want to group these, right? Which is a very standard concept within Adobe Creative Suite and just creative software in general. If I hit Command G, you'll see that nothing really happens. That's because within 3D and motion graphics software, if you want to group things together, you have to do it via something called a null object. The closest comparison I can make to a null object is a div, if we want to take some lessons from HTML and CSS, right? So it's an empty object that you can kind of add anything into it, any elements, and then those elements then become the children of that null object. And so I'm going to create a null object by going to my layers panel, right-clicking, new null object, and you'll see that now it's on top, and you should see this tiny little square with an anchor point in the corner, and that's your null object. You'll see that it's kind of completely empty. If I click into it, there's really nothing outside of just the square. After clicking into it, select along the X at the top to go back to your original composition. Now, how do we get this text and this shape layer into my null object? So first thing you want to do is you want to right click along this kind of top row right here, and you'll see that there's a columns, and you want to make sure that parents and link is selected. If it's not here, this is where you get it from, and from that now you'll see that there is this parent and link panel with a drop down and also this weird whirl. So I'm going to take my name Kevin, and I'm going to select the drop down, and I'm going to hit null 1, and so then now it's become a child of my null 1 object. The other way you can do it is by taking this kind of spiral called the parent pick whip, and I'm going to click on it, drag, and then I'm literally going to drag it to the null object. And so what you'll see now in the parents and link is that both of these have been selected under null 1. And so then now if I select my null 1, I can then drag it, and both of these objects will move with my null object. If I then go into my drop down, you'll then see that my null object also has some properties I can change about it. So I can transform the scale, for example, and it will scale both of my objects up. And similarly, you can use keyframing to change this over time. I can then also rotate however I want. The one thing that will not work on a null object itself is the effects control panel. So if I have my null 1 object selected, and then from this, right click, and let's say I'm just going to add some turbulent noise, you'll see that nothing has happened, and that's because you cannot actually add effects to a null object because it's completely empty and is being read as empty by AfterEffects. If you want to add effects, you could then add them to either your text layer or your shape layer, but you can't actually add it to the null object itself. I hope that makes sense. Rewind this video and watch it a couple of times in case it doesn't. and maybe take a couple seconds to try and make a null object and add some add some children to it. The next thing that we're going to talk about is blending modes that are specific to After Effects. So as you see, there's a thing called mode within your columns. If you don't see that, you can come down to here, and if you click the circle square button, you can click that to enable it. You can also right click along the top and make sure it's selected in columns. So blending modes, a lot of them are the same as are in Photoshop, for example, right? Like dissolve, darken. However, there are a couple that are very specific to After Effects, and they're found in this the second to last row right here. Really quickly, we're going to go over stencil alpha and stencil and silhouette alpha. And so with stencil alpha, if I click on it, what you'll see is it's kind of created a mask using my top layer, right? So it's cutting out the star underneath by using my text on top. And so if I then now click silhouette alpha, what you'll see is that now it's doing the opposite. And so what alpha means is that it's using the opacity and the solidness of the object to cut out one object from the other, generally the top from the bottom. This is in contrast to stencil luma and silhouette luma. And so for this, we're going to actually need an image. So I'm going to click back to this to normal. I'm going to bring in an image. You all can select anything online. I've got this nice sunflower field photo. I'm going to drag it in. And I'm going to make it really big so that it's kind of over everything. And so then now, it should be kind of the top layer in your panel. If I go to Stencil Luma, what you'll see is now the values of that image are being added to anything underneath it. And so if I wanted to maybe get a little fancier with this, I could then drag this down to in between my shape layer, and my text layer, so that it's kind of only adding to the shape layer underneath. If I were to then select Silhouette Luma, it kind of does the invert, right? So anything that is dark shows up light, and anything that is light shows up dark. And so with this, you can then start to maybe add values or cut out shapes using other layers. I'm going to quickly just make this also a child of the null 1 object, so all of these things can be dragged around together. Finally, another way in which that you can kind of make masks and edit the relationship between layers that doesn't involve creating a new layer or modes is through something called track matte. And so I'm going to click on normal so that I can see this properly. And you want to make sure that track matte, this is selected here. And you can do that again by going to columns. And then from that, afterwards, what you want to do is make sure that the sunflower is below the text, and then go to track matte, and you'll see alpha matte Kevin, or alpha matte whatever name you're using. And when I select on that, you'll see that now my top layer is being used to mask out my bottom layer. And these things kind of move independently of one another. So if I move my sunflower image, it's kind of, the mask is starting to cut out different parts of it. Similarly, if I move Kevin, it's starting to mask out different parts of it. So I kind of really like how it looks on this field, and I'm going to select both. and then move them down. So track mats, the way they work is that the bottom layer is the one that you select, and then it applies to the layer on top of it. And that's how you would then get all of this visual information from one to then relate to the other one. The final thing that I want to go over in this video is when you start to, with your layers panel, when you start to get into more complex animations, start to make a lot of things, your layers panel will start to be filled up and start to have a lot of different layers in it. And then from that, what you may see happen is that you may just have a lot of things open and a lot to navigate within one single layers panel. And you really want to kind of declutter and make sure that you're keeping everything kind of organized and neat, and that you're managing your files properly, just because there's so much to go through. And one way that you can do that is through what's called pre-composing. And so let's say, for example, I want this null object with its children, right, to be one thing. And so what I can do is I can select all of them, come to layer, and then hit pre-compose. I'm going to call this maybe star flower name. I'm going to click move all attributes into new composition, and then hit OK. And so what you'll see now is within my AfterEffects effects composition, I've now created a sub-composition called star flower name. And if I double click on this, you'll see that now my composition, I can then now edit these layers, but they're no longer taking up main space within my larger composition. And so I can come in here and let's say maybe I want to, move this mask up slightly. I can then go back to my effects, and it'll become, the changes I'm making will show up in this way. And so this is a good organizational tactic. Once you start to get a lot of things, you may want to apply it to your, it may be useful when applying it to your homework, into making sure that the moving portrait is maybe a pre-composition, and your layers or other things that are animating are also pre-compositions. If you then also hit tab, what you'll see is a workflow of how the pre-compositions are feeding into the larger canvas. So you'll see that Starflower goes into AfterEffects effects. And similarly, if you start to add other pre-compositions, you'll start to see a chain of them and where the workflow and which way it's going. Okay, so this is the end of the videos for week 11. Please be sure to check Canvas for both the exercise after this video and for your homework. And I hope you all are keeping safe and healthy and well. We are nearing the end, so please pull through and please stay safe. Thank you all so much.